how do mirrors actually work? You think you already know. Light hits the mirror. It bounces back. You see yourself. Simple. That explanation is so familiar that you've never questioned it. It feels complete. It feels obvious. And it's wrong in a way that should bother you. Because mirrors don't really bounce images back at you. They don't flip left and right. They don't create a copy of the world behind the glass. And they don't do what your intuition says they do at all. The strange part is not that mirrors behave oddly. The strange part is that you've been accepting a lie about them your entire life without noticing. Let's start with the most common misunderstanding. You're told that a mirror reverses left and right, but not up and down. That's the phrase everyone remembers. It sounds clever. It sounds like an explanation, but it explains nothing. Because if a mirror reversed left and right, it would also have to reverse up and down. There is no physical reason to choose one direction and ignore the other. Nature doesn't pick favorites. So why does your reflection raise its right hand when you raise your left, but doesn't flip upside down? The answer is uncomfortable, because it reveals that the mirror isn't doing what you think it's doing at all. A mirror does not reverse left and right. It reverses front and back. That's it. Everything else is something you add. When you stand in front of a mirror, the mirror does exactly one thing. It reflects light straight back along the direction it came from. Forward becomes backward. That's the only reversal that happens. There is no left-right trick, no image manipulation, no spatial swap. The mirror simply sends light back. So why does the reflection feel reversed sideways? Because you are comparing your reflection to how you imagine another person facing you. You're not comparing coordinate systems. You're comparing bodies. If another person stood facing you, their right hand would line up with your left. That's not because space flipped. It's because they rotated to face you. The mirror does not rotate you. You do that mentally. This means the mirror isn't lying to you. Your interpretation is. And once you see that, the mirror stops being a magical object and starts being something far more revealing. Because mirrors don't show you how the world is arranged. They show you how you interpret space. Now let's strip this down even further. What actually happens when you look at a mirror? Light leaves your face. It spreads out in all directions. Some of it hits the mirror. When it does, the electrons in the mirror's surface respond. They oscillate. They re-emit light. That re-emitted light travels back toward your eyes. Nothing passes through the mirror. Nothing comes from behind it. No image lives inside the glass. The mirror is not a window. It is a surface that refuses passage. And that refusal is crucial. The electrons at the mirror's surface are constrained. They cannot absorb and re-emit light randomly. They must obey precise electromagnetic rules. Those rules force the reflected light to leave at the same angle it arrived. This is why mirrors are precise. This is why reflections are sharp. Not because mirrors store images, but because they enforce symmetry. The mirror does not know what it is reflecting. It does not care whether it's your face, a tree, or the night sky. It applies the same rule to every photon. Angle in equals angle out. That's the entire mechanism. Now here's the part that should make you pause. If mirrors don't flip images, and they don't contain pictures, and they don't manipulate space, then where is the image? Because you clearly see one. The answer is unsettling. The image is not on the mirror. It is not behind the mirror. It is not inside the mirror. The image exists only in your brain. What the mirror provides is a pattern of light. Your visual system interprets that pattern as if it came from a location behind the mirror, because that's the simplest explanation your brain can construct. Your brain assumes light travels in straight lines. So when light enters your eyes from the mirror, your brain extends those lines backward. It constructs a virtual world behind the glass. That world is not real. It is inferred. This is why the reflection appears to be behind the mirror, even though nothing is there. Your brain is lying to you, helpfully, and it lies so consistently that you mistake the lie for reality. Now consider this. If you move closer to the mirror, the image moves closer. If you step back, it recedes. If you tilt your head, the image tilts. All of this reinforces the illusion that there is a space behind the mirror. But that space does not exist. The mirror never sends light into it. No photon ever goes there. The entire world you see behind the mirror is a construction built from reflected rays. That's why mirrors feel uncanny. They create a space that behaves like real space but isn't. And now comes the truly strange part. If you were to replace the mirror with a perfect camera and screen system, one that captured light and displayed it perfectly, you would get something similar, but not the same. Because a mirror does not delay information. It does not record and replay. It reflects instantaneously. This means your reflection is not a copy of you from a moment ago. It is you now, seen along a different path. The delay is so small that it's negligible, but conceptually, it matters. You are not seeing a picture of yourself. You are seeing yourself directly, by way of light, taking a longer route. That's why mirrors are so effective at fooling you. They don't simulate reality. They are reality, just redirected. Now ask yourself something. If mirrors simply reflect light, why do they feel so special? Why does a mirror feel different from any other reflective surface? Because most surfaces scatter light. Their electrons re-emit photons in many directions. That destroys the pattern. You see brightness, not images. A mirror is special because its surface is smooth at the scale of light's wavelength. That smoothness forces coherence. The pattern survives. So mirrors are not magical. They are disciplined. They force light to behave. And because of that discipline, they expose something profound. You don't see the world as it is. You see the world as light allows you to reconstruct it. A mirror doesn't show you truth. It shows you the rules. And once you understand that, the lie you've accepted your whole life begins to unravel. Once you realize that the image in a mirror doesn't exist anywhere in space, something subtle shifts in how you think about seeing itself. You stop treating vision as a passive act, something that simply receives what's out there, and start recognizing it as an active construction. A mirror doesn't give you an image, it gives you information. And information only becomes an image after your brain gets involved. This is why mirrors are so effective at revealing your assumptions. They behave perfectly consistently, and yet they feel strange because they expose the shortcuts your mind takes to make sense of the world. Your brain evolved in an environment where light almost always comes directly from objects. When light enters your eyes, the safest assumption is that it traveled in a straight line from where it originated. That assumption works so well that your brain applies it automatically without asking permission. A mirror exploits that assumption. When reflected light enters your eyes, your brain traces it backward in straight lines, just as it always does. Those lines converge behind the mirror, so your brain places the image there. It has no reason to suspect deception. The rules haven't changed, but the conclusion is wrong. There is no space behind the mirror containing your reflection. There is only a surface redirecting light. This is why mirrors can be so disorienting in unfamiliar situations. You reach out expecting depth that isn't there. You misjudge distance. You react to motion that doesn't exist. The mirror hasn't failed you. Your expectations have. Now let's confront the most persistent myth about mirrors head on. The idea that mirrors reverse left and right is not just false. It actively prevents you from understanding what's really happening. Mirrors reverse only one direction, the direction perpendicular to their surface. Front becomes back, that's all. So why does left seem swapped with right? Because you are imagining yourself rotated. You subconsciously picture another person standing where your reflection appears to be. To face you, that person would have to turn around. That rotation swaps left and right relative to you, but the mirror never performed that rotation. You did it in your mind. This confusion persists because humans think in bodies, not coordinate systems. We don't naturally analyze space in terms of axes and transformations. We think in terms of facing, turning, and orientation. The mirror exploits that habit. It doesn't flip left and right. It flips toward and away. Everything else is interpretation. Now think about how strange it is that this illusion is so strong. You've looked into mirrors your entire life. You've interacted with them daily, and yet the misunderstanding persists. That tells you something important. Understanding does not come from familiarity. It comes from asking the right questions. Mirrors are so ordinary that you stopped interrogating them long ago. They became invisible. But once you look again, carefully, the simplicity of their behavior becomes unsettling. All a mirror does is enforce a boundary condition on electromagnetic waves. It forces electrons at its surface to oscillate in response to incoming light. And those oscillations re-radiate light in a precise way. There is no awareness, no manipulation, no image processing, just fields responding to fields. And yet from that simplicity emerges one of the most psychologically powerful objects you know. You recognize yourself in a mirror. You make eye contact with a pattern of light. You feel watched by something that is not there. That reaction doesn't come from the mirror. It comes from you. Your brain is exquisitely tuned to interpret faces, symmetry, and motion. A mirror delivers those cues with uncanny precision. It produces a version of reality that is correct in every optical sense and false in every spatial one. That's why it feels eerie. Now consider this. If you cover half of a mirror, does half of your image disappear? No. You still see your entire face, just with fewer angles available. Each point on the mirror reflects light from your entire body, not just a corresponding part. This alone should tell you that the image is not on the mirror. If it were, blocking part of the surface would erase a corresponding part of the picture. But it doesn't. The mirror does not map object to surface point by point. It maps directions. Each direction of incoming light is reflected back. Your eyes collect those directions and reconstruct a scene. This means every part of the mirror contains information about the whole scene, just from a different perspective. Again, the mirror isn't special. Your interpretation is. Now push this one step further. If mirrors don't store images, and reflections exist only in perception, then the mirror is not showing you yourself in the way you think. It's showing you how light from you behaves. What you recognize as you is a reconstruction based on familiar cues. Symmetry, motion, proportion. You are not seeing yourself directly. You are seeing how you appear under a specific transformation. This is why mirrors can distort self-perception. They show you something that is optically correct, but experientially incomplete. You see a version of yourself that no one else ever sees exactly that way. No one else sees you reversed front to back along their line of sight. Only you do. So the mirror is not a neutral observer. It presents a very particular view, one that exists nowhere else in the universe. And once you grasp that, the final lie becomes visible. The lie is not that mirrors flip left and right. The lie is that mirrors show reality as it is. They don't. They show reality as light, geometry, and your brain conspire to present it. And that realization doesn't make mirrors less fascinating. It makes them more honest. Once you accept that a mirror is not showing you an object but a reconstruction, the experience of looking at one becomes strangely unstable. You begin to notice how much work your mind is doing just to make sense of what seems effortless. A mirror gives you no depth information of its own. It does not tell your brain how far away anything is. It only redirects light. Depth is inferred entirely from motion, perspective, and your expectations. That's why a flat mirror can feel like a window until you try to touch it. Your brain has already built a three-dimensional world behind the glass before your hand ever gets there. And that failure, the moment your fingers meet cold resistance, is the moment the illusion collapses. What's interesting is how rarely that collapse bothers you. You adjust instantly. You accept the surface. The brain updates its model and moves on. This tells you something crucial. Your experience of reality is not about truth. It's about usefulness. Your brain doesn't care whether the image is really behind the mirror. It cares whether its predictions work. As long as the reflection behaves consistently, the brain is satisfied. This is why mirrors feel so natural and so deceptive at the same time. They perfectly obey physical laws, but they exploit cognitive shortcuts. Now consider how different this is from a photograph. A photograph captures light at one moment and freezes it. A mirror never freezes anything. It is always live, always updating, always tied to the present. That immediacy matters. When you move, the reflection moves with no lag you can perceive. That synchrony reinforces the sense that what you're seeing is directly connected to you. Not a copy, not a record, but a continuation. This is why mirrors feel more real than screens, even when the screen shows a live feed. The mirror's transformation is simple and continuous. There is no encoding, no delay, no interpretation step you can detect. It's just light, redirected. And that simplicity is exactly what makes the illusion so strong. Now let's return to the idea of reversal one last time, because this is where the misunderstanding hides most stubbornly. If you draw arrows on your body, one pointing up, one pointing left, one pointing forward, and then look in a mirror, something very specific happens. The arrow pointing forward now points backward. The others do not change. Up stays up. Left stays left. Only the direction perpendicular to the mirror flips. This is not a trick. It is the only transformation the mirror performs. Everything else, the sense of swapped sides, the feeling of reversal, comes from the fact that you are used to comparing yourself to other people by imagining them rotated to face you. The mirror never rotates anything. You do. This distinction matters because it exposes how easily language can smuggle in false explanations. Saying mirrors flip left and right feels explanatory, but it actually blocks understanding. It replaces a precise transformation with a vague intuition. Feynman hated explanations like that. Not because they were simple, but because they were lazy. They stopped curiosity instead of sharpening it. A good explanation doesn't just tell you what happens, it tells you what doesn't. Mirrors do not flip images. They do not swap sides. They do not create copies. They reflect directions. Once you see that, a mirror stops being mysterious and starts being revealing. Not of the world, but of you. It reveals how much of seeing is interpretation, how much of space is inferred, how much of what's there is something your brain quietly invents. And now comes the final, uncomfortable realization. If a mirror can convince you that there is a world behind the glass when there isn't, how often does the same thing happen without a mirror? Your entire visual experience works this way. Light enters your eyes. Your brain constructs objects, distances, boundaries, and motion. You experience a coherent world not because the information is complete, but because your brain fills the gaps efficiently. The mirror is just honest about the trick. It shows you a world that behaves like space, but isn't space. It obeys optical rules perfectly and spatial rules not at all. And because it does so consistently, you trust it. That trust is the lie you've accepted. Not about mirrors, but about perception. You assume seeing is passive. It isn't. You assume space is given. It's inferred. The mirror simply makes this visible. So when you look at yourself in a mirror, you're not looking at an object. You're watching your own perceptual machinery at work, taking light, applying assumptions, and building a world that feels real enough to recognize yourself in. That's why mirrors feel intimate. They don't just reflect you, they reflect how you see. At this point, the mirror has quietly stopped being an object and turned into a lesson. Not about light, or glass, or reflection, but about how easily the mind confuses interpretation with reality. A mirror does not create a second world. It does not duplicate space. It does not invert you in some mysterious way. It simply enforces a rule. Light that arrives is sent back. Everything else, the depth, the symmetry, the sense of a person looking back at you, comes from how your brain interprets that returned light. And that's why the lie you've accepted is so persistent. You were never really taught how mirrors work. You were taught a shortcut explanation that felt good enough to stop asking questions. Left and right are reversed. End of story. But that story doesn't survive contact with careful thinking, because mirrors don't choose left or right. They don't know what a body is. They don't understand orientation. They reflect directions. Nothing more. Once you internalize that, something subtle but important changes. You stop treating mirrors as special devices that manipulate reality and start seeing them as honest objects that expose your assumptions. They don't distort the world. They reveal how you reconstruct it. That's why the reflection feels both familiar and alien. It moves when you move. It copies your expressions. It matches you perfectly, and yet it's a version of you that exists nowhere else. No one else ever sees you the way you see yourself in a mirror, not because the mirror is wrong, but because it shows you along a path light never takes to anyone else's eyes. That realization should unsettle you a little, because it means that what you call seeing yourself is not a direct encounter with an object, but an encounter with a model your brain builds from light. And that's true everywhere, not just in mirrors. The mirror simply makes it obvious. It creates a world that behaves like space, but isn't. A world that responds correctly to motion, but contains no substance. A world you instinctively trust until your hand meets glass. And when that happens, you don't blame your brain. You blame the mirror. But the mirror did nothing wrong. It followed the rules perfectly. The discomfort comes from realizing how much of your experience depends on silent assumptions you never agreed to consciously. Light travels in straight lines. Objects occupy space. Images correspond to locations. These assumptions work so well that your brain applies them automatically. A mirror exploits them effortlessly, so the lie you've accepted is not really about mirrors at all. It's the belief that seeing is passive, that perception is faithful, that the world simply presents itself to you as it is. It doesn't. You build it. And a mirror, in its simplicity, shows you that process in action. It shows you that space can be inferred where none exists. That identity can be recognized in a pattern of light. That reality, as you experience it, is a collaboration between physics and interpretation. Once you understand that, mirrors stop being confusing toys and start being precise demonstrations. They demonstrate that physics can be simple and still overturn intuition. That explanations don't need to be complicated to be deep. That the most familiar objects often hide the clearest lessons. A mirror doesn't flip you, it reflects rules. And those rules, when followed honestly, reveal that the strangest thing about mirrors was never the glass. It was always the way you see. If this changed how you think about mirrors or about seeing itself, comment mirror below. I want to know which idea caught you off guard. Subscribe if you want more everyday things explained in ways that quietly dismantle your assumptions.